Welcome to the Baptist NZ Podcast Network. This is Biblical Insights, the Gospel and the Land of the Bible.
Okay.
Welcome back.
Thank you, Lauren. It's good to be back.
And I'm here with Philip Church, and we're going to talk about some definitions, first and foremost, and then we're going to dive into life in the West Bank and Gaza, and then talk about how Christians have responded.
Yeah, so some of the stuff we talked about in the last session was sort of horrific and difficult to stomach, but it needed to be said.
Yes.
So I want to take a pause now and go back a little while and do some definitions. So I want to define the word Israel. In Israel, in the Old Testament, is the 12 tribes and their territory initially. Then, you might remember from last time, it became the land and people of the northern kingdom after Solomon's death, when the kingdom divided between Israel in the north and Judah in the south.
Where the 10 tribes were.
The 10 tribes.
Yes.
And they were called Israel, sometimes called Samaria, sometimes called Israel, sometimes called Joseph. The book of Amos has all these different names talking about the same people. And then Israel is also a word for the people of God. And the Old Testament people of God were called Israel. In the New Testament, Israel sometimes means the Jewish people, but more often, especially in Paul's letters, it still means the lost people of the 10 northern tribes that Paul believes are still in the mind of God and not lost to God's promises. As for the Jewish people, the word Jew, when you and I think of a Jew, if I say when you think the word Jew, do you think of religion or ethnicity?
I'd say ethnicity, and I think it's correct me if I'm wrong. It's when your mother is a Jew, you are a Jew.
Yeah,
that's the ethnic.
Yeah,
background.
Correct.
Yes, okay.
But it's also a religious term.
Yes,
because Judaism is a religion, and Jewishness is a post-exilic after the return from exile of the southern people to Judea. They were called Judeans, abbreviated to Jews. So that's where the ethnic thing. So you can't be a Jew before the return from the exile of the southern kingdom.
So yeah, the word Jew comes from Judea, Judean.
Yeah, Judean, yeah.
Which was the southern,
really Judean, yeah.
Well, that's the southern kingdom.
Southern kingdom returned from exile.
Where Jerusalem is.
Where Jerusalem is,
okay, I follow.
So they were the Jews. And so you hear people talking about David being a Jew. Well, David wasn't a Jew. You don't have Jews before the exile of the southern kingdom. So in the New Testament, it's the word for the Jewish people, sometimes called Israel, which is also the name for those 10 tribes. And then, of course, it's for the land. The land is also called Israel in the New Testament. Today, Israel is a democratic state formed by a UN resolution on 29 November 1947.
Post-World War II.
Yeah, post-World War II. So that's what, when we talk about Israel today, it is not the 12 tribes and their people, and it's not those 10 northern tribes. It is the name of a democratic state, and also the name of the land that they live in.
So we've got biblical Israel, we've got present-day Israel, the nation.
Yeah.
Nation-state like New Zealand is a nation-state.
It's a political thing, political entity. UN said we'll form the State of Israel on 14 May 1948. And then today is also the name of the land inhabited by citizens of that state. It's called Israel. An Israeli is a citizen of the State of Israel.
The modern definition, not biblical Israel, but modern Israel. Yeah. You're an Israeli if you're from Israel.
Yeah, a citizen of that state.
Like you're a New Zealander if you're from New Zealand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
An Israelite is a member of one of the 12 tribes.
Okay, so that's like biblical Israel.
Yeah. And it's another name for a Jew after Babylonian exile and in the New Testament, sometimes called Israelite. So you remember Jesus encountered Nathanael and said, "Here is an Israelite in whom there is no guile." Remember that? Beginning of John.
Yeah.
A more recent translation might say, "An Israelite in whom there is no deceit."
Yeah.
So sometimes they call themselves Israelites, sometimes they call themselves Judeans, but an Israelite is a member of the 12 tribes or a Jewish person in biblical times.
So it's all about your ancestors, you know, who your parents were, whereas being an Israeli, it's about your nation state that you have a passport for.
But of course you can be, well, It's a bit complicated, but you can be a Jewish Israeli if your mother's a Jew. You can be a Palestinian Israeli, which we'll come to in a minute.
If you're not a Jew.
Yeah, if you're not a Jew.
Okay, I understand.
That's right. So the word Jew now, in the New Testament, Jew is an ethnic term for inhabitant of Judea. You could also be a diaspora Judean, a Jew that is a Judean or a Jew who lives somewhere else in the Mediterranean world, otherwise known as a Judean, after the return from the Babylonian exile to today. We've almost said that already, didn't we? Yeah, so, and then today, it's someone whose mother is a Jew, and it's an ethnic and a religious term.
Yeah.
So if I talk about a Jew today, and I was talking about this with someone yesterday, if I talk about a Jew today, I'm thinking of someone whose life has been formed by what they call the Mishnah and the Talmud, these Jewish documents. They call it the oral law delivered to Moses on Mount Sinai.
Right.
They call it the Mishnah and the Talmud, these massive documents saying, yeah, you've heard 613 commandments, 365 for what you can do and the balance for what you can't do, 630, and all that's contained in the Mishnah and the Talmud. And a religious Jewish person rules his life by these documents.
This is like not eating pork and
all that stuff.
such.
Yeah.
Yes, okay.
Yeah, and carrying a reed and a lemon on the Feast of Tabernacles, whatever that's all about.
Right, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. It's called halakha. How do you walk?
Okay.
Palestine is the name given to the land by the Romans after driving out the Jews in 135 AD.
We covered this in the history.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
did.
that's right.
So they named the land Palestine. Now, Israeli propaganda will tell you there never was a country called Palestine.
This is what I thought.
Yeah.
I wouldn't usually say I'm like a propaganda kind of person, but I thought that Palestine was modern. Yeah. But then when you said that it was named by the Romans, that came as a surprise to me. Yeah.
So as it happens, I was watching a YouTube clip today by an academic Israeli who said there never was a country called Palestine. Someone didn't interrupt her and say, did you know Golda Meir, the fourth Prime Minister of Israel, had a Palestinian passport?
Well, then exactly. So how does that check out?
How does that? Yeah. So Palestine is a name given to the land by the Romans, and it's a name. It's also the name adopted now by the Arabs who live, the indigenous Arabs who live there, who call themselves Palestinians.
There's a lot of terms here where there's like one meaning and another meaning, isn't there?
Yeah, and it's complicated. This woman I was watching on YouTube, who's an Israeli academic, there never was a country called Palestine. Did you know that before 1871 there was no country called Germany? Germany did not exist before 1871.
No.
Yeah. Germany was a whole lot of city-states.
Yeah.
And then so they get together and form Germany. But you're not going to deny the existence of the Germans.
No.
Because their country didn't exist before 1871.
That's a very good point.
Yeah.
Or even New Zealand wasn't a nation
before.
Only a few hundred years, really.
Well,
yeah.
Was it 1840?
Yeah, but before that was a collection of tribes. There wasn't the nation state of New Zealand.
Yeah, it was a collection of tribes.
No.
So there have been attempts for many years to deny the existence of Palestinians. One early Christian Zionist, and we'll talk about them later, coined the term a land with no people for a people with no land.
Well, that seems very convenient. That kind of paints the picture that no one's here.
Yeah.
And we have sympathy for the Jewish people.
Yeah.
Let's let them have this land. I mean, if no one else is using it,
no
why not?
Well,
Look, if nobody was there, then why wouldn't you slot them right in?
Yeah. So,
but
Palestine.
But there were people there.
There were. So denying the name of Palestine, which happens often, is another attempt to deny the legitimacy and existence of Palestinian people.
Very interesting.
Yeah. So Palestinian now is in the indigenous Arab inhabitants of Palestine, or of that part of the world, then and now. Also, interestingly enough, 20% of the citizens of the State of Israel are Palestinian or Arab Israelis. So there are Arabs who live within the territory called Israel, as opposed to Gaza and the West Bank.
Yeah.
And they are citizens of the State of Israel, and about 20% of their citizens are Palestinian Israelis.
And that means they're indigenous to...
They're indigenous to there, and they live there.
And their family has.
Yeah.
Or,
And I know a couple of them.
Right, yeah.
Who live there.
And that's different again to people who are Jewish by ethnicity who live there. That marker there would be their ethnic marker.
So you can have Palestinian Israelis.
Yeah.
You can have Jewish Israelis. You can have Palestinian Arabs.
Yeah.
And
but you can't have Jewish Arabs.
No, you can't have Jewish Arabs.
No. Yeah. I suppose unless you converted, if you were born into an Arab. Oh no, because Arabs are... I suppose you could be practiced.
You could become Jewish,
but you wouldn't be ethnically Jewish. You would be religiously Jewish.
So if you're male, you've got to get circumcised, and then you can become a Jew.
Okay. Okay. So these things are not as black and white. Yeah. People maybe think you are either one or the other, but actually, I mean, I like many things in life, right? It's not as clear cut as we'd like it.
It's a bit complex, yeah.
Yeah.
And then I want to define the people of God.
Oh yes.
People of God are believers in Jesus, including both Jews and Gentiles.
This is biblical. Yes.
No, this is today.
Oh no, but if we talk about the people of God, this is a biblical concept that everybody is a person of God.
So of course in the Old Testament the people of God were Israel.
Yeah.
Today the people of God are believers in Jesus, including both Jews and Gentiles, who are what I call Christ-allegiant people. Mm. And that means that if you are a citizen of the state of Israel, an unbelieving citizen of the state of Israel, you're not a member of the people of God.
Okay.
And so these definitions, I think, are really significant and careful to get very clear in our minds as to who we're talking about.
Yeah. Okay, I understand.
Yeah. So there's my definitions.
People of God are people who are saved.
Yeah, people of God are people who are saved. People who belong to Jesus.
Yeah.
Those are God's people. And they include Jews and Gentiles.
Exactly.
And you remember at the very beginning, the people of God were a majority of Jews. So it turned up on the day of Pentecost and 3,000 people become believers in Jesus on that day, and they're all Jewish people. And then a couple of days later there's another 5,000. And then, of course, the balance has changed now, and the great majority of Gentiles like you and me, but there are Jewish believers in Jesus, and then some of them Messianic Jews.
Because they believe in the Messiah. Whereas a Jew who is not a Messianic Jew believes that the
Messiah's still to come.
They don't believe that Jesus was the Messiah.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. I understand now.
Okay, so there's some definitions. I've got a map of that part of the world in front of me.
Oh, it would be good to Google this, Yeah.
So I suggest people should pause the thing and go to Google and open Google and just look for a map of what we call the Levant, really, the eastern end of the Mediterranean.
From Lebanon to Egypt.
Yeah. So, and I've got, as you look at it, so we know where we are. I'm relatively familiar with this place because I've been to most of these countries. So if we start at the northern end, the very northern end of the eastern end of the Mediterranean, Syria comes over the top and becomes a coastal. It's a coastal thing. But below Syria is Lebanon, a narrow country that is narrow, made up of two mountain ranges and a valley between them. That's basically what Lebanon is. Then below that, on the map, if you look on your map, you'll see the Sea of Galilee and the Dead Sea, and they're joined by the Jordan River. And on the west side of the Jordan River is the state of Israel, and on the east side of the Jordan River is a country called Jordan. And then above that is Syria, the Golan Heights we talked about in the last episode.
But they annexed.
That they annexed, part of Syria, but Israel has annexed it. Then if you go down the coast, the Gaza Strip, as they call it, is a small territory just about the corner where it turns around to go over the top of Egypt. Across the other side we talk about Jordan. Then in Israel, this little piece of land, variously called the West Bank, the occupied territories, or Palestine. South of that, on the other side of the Jordan, is Saudi Arabia. And then you can see the big triangular Sinai Peninsula, which is part of Egypt. Israel took it over in the Yom Kippur War in 1973, and then they gave it back on the 6th of October 1973, as it happens. I've been in Egypt in what they call 6th of October City, which is to celebrate the return of the Sinai Peninsula to Egypt, and they named a city after it. like a satellite city from Cairo.
I always thought that Gaza was closer to the West Bank for some reason, because it's always talked about in the same breath of Gaza and the occupied Palestinian area. But it's actually interesting that it kind of sandwiches Israel. If Israel's down the middle, you've got the Gaza Strip on the left, and you've got the West Bank on the right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Correct. So those things, and it's worth just keeping those things clear in our minds. Now I've got another image in front of me now, and if you pause the podcast again and Google loss of land, the first thing that comes up will be a picture with 6 maps on it, and yellow and green shading on the maps. You'll also see a whole variety of other maps of this, and some of them have got big no entry signs on them saying false, and this is not true and this is inaccurate, mostly Jewish propaganda as it happens. But there we have, and the one I'm looking at has got a picture of what is currently Israel, making up Israel and Palestine. And it's yellow. On the 1917 it's yellow because it's inhabited by a lot of Arabs. And so the yellow, we could call it Arab ancestral land.
And it's in the first picture, it's completely yellow.
Completely yellow.
Yeah.
And you can see the little blue bit, which is the Dead Sea, near the bottom on the right. Then the next one is yellow, but it's got some green dots on it, and that's up to 1945. And that's where a number of Jewish people were living in that land. And remember I spoke of Alex Awad, who said that we lived next door to each other and went to each other's festivals and got on and lived in peace with one another.
Right.
So there was a minority of Jewish people living in that land to 1945. 1947 is what we have for the UN petition plan that we talked about, which is 54% for Jewish people and the remainder for Arabs. And you can see the yellow for the Arabs and the green for the Jewish people. Then 1948 and 1949, when Israel was formed, you'll see what actually happened is a lot smaller. So we mentioned before that Israel had taken another 24%. So now Israel has 78% and the Arabs have got 22%. The next picture to the right says 1967. The territories are almost identical then, but that picture shows because in 1967 Israel then occupied the Palestinian part of it. And so Israel is sitting in there, the Israeli Defence Forces are walking around with their machine guns, and there are checkpoints everywhere, there are roads. If you live in that land, you either have a yellow number plate or a green number plate. If you're Jewish, your number plate is yellow, and if you're a Palestinian, you have a green number plate.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
I really don't like that, actually.
No.
Yeah.
Well, not only that, but some roads are only for green number plates, and some roads are only for yellow number plates.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And then the right-hand one, you'll see it's got smaller and smaller because of now the Jewish settlements inside the Arab land.
Right, so you can see on the left you've got the little tiny yellow strip of Gaza.
Yeah.
And then you've got some splotches up the top middle.
Yeah.
Yellow, and then some on the right near the West Bank.
Yeah. So that is
it's mostly green though. That is
mostly green because of the 700,000 Jewish settlers who live on, and the Palestinians call it land stolen from the Palestinians. Okay. And not only that, what's interesting, and we talked about the number plates, there are motorways. This is a very small country.
Yeah, it's very small.
Yeah. And there are motorways that go from Jerusalem to some of these settlements. And if you have a yellow number plate, you drive on the motorways and suddenly you leave Jerusalem and you go home about 20 kilometres south and you're probably there in 10 minutes and you're home again. Yeah. And you think you're probably in one of the suburbs of Jerusalem. Whereas the guys with the other colour number plates have to go on these other old roads that are rickety and not very well looked after. Right. So interesting. It's complicated. It's complicated. So that image is worth looking at.
Yeah, just to even see the scale of how the land has shifted from being possessed by indigenous Palestinians to now Jewish. And remember the Balfour Declaration. Yeah. Nothing will be done to prejudice the rights of the indigenous inhabitants of the land. Yeah, the whole idea was that they could go there if they wanted to, but that wouldn't affect the people who lived there already. That has turned out not to be true. Yeah. And some people are saying, well, actually,
There are all these other countries, all these other Arab countries around here. Why don't they go and live there and leave this place for Israel?
But that's not the call. You can't tell people, why don't you go live somewhere else? And
we know what Maori people think about their ancestral land.
Oh, yeah, and it's not just Maori. Yeah. It's a common thing across...
And it's the same here.
Almost all countries, everyone likes to have, especially if your family lived there, you don't really want to leave.
No, this is ancestral land.
Very hard to kick someone out of there. I don't want to leave my house, you don't want to leave yours.
No.
No.
I have been teaching in Papua New Guinea a few times, and when my computer was idle, pictures were coming up on the screen that the students were looking at, and a picture came up of a house that I'd owned. I said, that was my house. I sold. What, you sold your house?
Really?
Yeah, Papua New Guineans have attachment to their tribal ancestral land.
Yeah, I suppose, why would you want to leave?
Yeah.
I suppose,
For Westerners like us, land is a commodity.
True.
For Indigenous people, land is ancestral. So it's very complicated. I got a couple of comments about life in the West Bank and Gaza. This comes from a woman called Dr. Ruth Padilla de Borst. This came in September 2024, and listeners will probably be aware of the Lausanne Congress on World Evangelization held in Seoul in September 2024. And one of the speakers was this woman, Ruth Padilla de Borst. And she said this in one of her talks to the community. There is no room for indifference toward all who are suffering the scourge of war and violence in the world around and the uprooted and beleaguered people of Gaza. The hostages held by both Israel and Hamas and their families. The threatened Palestinians in their own territories, all of who are mourning the loss of loved ones. Their pain is our pain if we are God's people. Then she said, truly the Hamas attack almost a year ago was abhorrent and absolutely reprehensible. And truly people who live in Israel, Jewish, Palestinian, others, are being threatened as I write. Their pain is our pain. At the same time, the long-standing suffering of Palestinians has been compounded by the attacks on Gaza since October 7, where over 40,000 people, now 45,000, have been killed, many of them children. Additionally, settler attacks have only increased on the West Bank. Their pain is our pain, or it should be. However, far too many evangelicals around the world acritically stand with Israel and remain oblivious to the suffering Palestinians. This injustice must be named. She actually got into trouble for saying it, interesting enough.
She got in trouble for saying it?
She got in trouble for saying that at the Congress on World Evangelization.
Is that deemed too political?
Deemed too political, yeah. It was, yeah.
Interesting.
But their pain is our pain. And I think it's past time, and while we're doing this podcast, it's past time for the church to remain silent.
Yeah.
That's what needs to happen.
Well, shine the light, right? Just try to inform ourselves.
There's a couple more things to say, and then we'll bring this one to an end.
Okay.
To ask the question, what are we going to make of all this? And it's been pretty horrific and heavy.
Yeah.
Many Christians will tell us that the return of the Jews to the land and the formation of the State of Israel fulfills biblical prophecy.
I've heard this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've heard this. This was L. Nelson Bill, Billy Graham's father-in-law, writing in 1967 after the Six-Day War. Bill said that for the first time in more than 2,000 years, Jerusalem is now completely in the hands of the Jews, gives a student of the Bible a thrill and a renewed faith in the accuracy and validity of the Bible, said L. Nelson Bill after 1967 war.
So I suppose if you had that perspective today, in 2024, you were looking at it, well, you know, the Jewish people have to have Israel for Jesus to come back. Yes, there might be suffering, but we can't go against the prophecy that the Jews have to hold Israel for Jesus to come back. So yes, it's sad that people are dying, but what are you going to do about it? This is their perspective, right? Like, it's sad, but we need Jesus to come back at any cost.
And that's the way it happens.
Yeah, that's the narrative I've seen.
Yeah. They say the promise to Abraham is inviolable.
Oh, this is the promise.
The original promise we talked about way back.
Yeah.
I will give you this land to you and your descendants.
That's one of the three promises. Yeah?
One of the three, but God keeps his promises.
Yep.
Yeah.
True.
They say that Old Testament prophecy must be fulfilled. And they are looking forward to the rebuilt temple and the reinstitution of Jewish worship in Jerusalem as the next step.
Can you remind me what the Old Testament prophecy they're referring to is?
So I said not specific Old Testament prophecy. Old Testament prophecy that says, I'm going to bring you back to your land.
Oh,
So texts like, and listeners might want to open their Bible at Micah chapter 4, verses 1 to 5 is one place. Might look at Amos chapter 9, verses 11 to 15.
Yeah.
These important prophecies talking about Israel returning to their land.
Yeah.
And so many Christians are saying now what the Old Testament has said is now happening.
And the Jewish temple will be rebuilt, and there'll be reinstitution of Jewish worship in Jerusalem.
And then Jesus will come back.
So it's unfortunate, but they see it maybe as this is the fulfillment. So it is what it is.
Yeah. Other Christians say the cross implies a new perspective on the land. God no longer deals with people territorially.
Yeah.
You and I are followers of Jesus too.
And we don't live in Jerusalem.
Don't live there.
No.
The New Testament does not interpret the Old Testament as some would have us interpret it. And that's a big claim, but we're going to deal with that in future episodes.
That sounds like we're going to have to unpack that.
We're going to unpack that. Yeah, we will, and we will. While the Palestinian people are not innocent of wrongdoing, Israel is in the land as an oppressor.
Oh, that's going to be seen as political by some people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, when the same journey we took to Israel in 1996 when we went to Christchurch, Jerusalem, and I was ignorant of all this stuff.
No, how would you know? They don't teach this stuff in school.
No.
Or churches.
Yeah. We went to Galilee, and we stayed for a few days in Tiberias, which is on the coast of the Sea of Galilee. Had a swim in the Sea of Galilee, nice, very rocky, hard to keep your balance on the rocks. And we stayed at a Church of Scotland guest house. And the woman who was running this Church of Scotland guest house said to us, you know, Israel's oppressing these people in here. I thought, what are you talking about? I had no idea.
Huh.
So
that was not recent, actually.
Yeah, that was 1996. Yeah.
When I was 1.
Yeah. I was a little older.
But no, you're right though, I suppose. Yeah. We really will have to unpack a lot of this because it's seen as these are all quite political statements.
They are.
And some people might hear this and think, oh, that's quite outrageous.
Yeah.
So they have to tune in and hear us explain it.
You got to come back.
Please wait to listen. Yeah. Do not send us mean comments until you hear what we have to say.
Well said. And then finally, resolution will only come as both sides take the path of non-resistance. And there's work going on for that path of non-resistance.
It's not easy, though.
Today.
Conflict is so hard.
Yeah, it is.
Especially when it's got this many years of history. It's just really entrenched.
Yeah. If listeners are interested in some of the work that is going on, I would encourage them to Google Bethlehem Bible College. Bethlehem Bible College, started by one of the Awad brothers, talk about Alex Awad. He was the Dean of Students at Bethlehem Bible College. His older brother Bishara founded the Bethlehem Bible College, and they're doing really good work. So I think we've come to the end of this session.
Lot. Yeah,
we've covered a huge amount. And what are we doing? What are we going to do next time?
Oh, I think we're going to be looking at perspectives on the land.
Yeah,
because we kind of talked about people thinking that maybe these things have to happen for the biblical prophecy to come true. So we're going to have a look at the Old Testament's Israelite perspective on the land, and then a Palestinian's Christian perspective on the land as well. Yeah,
that will also be quite a brief session, episode, and then quite a long one when we talk about Zionism and restorationism. After that,
yes, that will be a crunchy one.
Yep. So thanks for listening, folks.
Yes, and thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
We will.
Thanks for tuning in to Biblical Insights, the Gospel and the Land of the Bible. We hope you gained a deeper understanding of God's Word today. If you have questions or comments, we'd love to hear from you. Email us at biblicalinsightspodcast@gmail.com. A huge thank you to our amazing producer Mike Crudge and our talented audio editor Karis Fotheringham, and thank you to the Baptist NZ Podcast Network for supporting us. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please take a moment to review and rate us on your favourite podcast platform. Your 5-star rating and thoughtful reviews help us reach more people with biblical insights. Join us next time on Biblical Insights, the Gospel and the Land of the Bible, as we continue to explore the Bible and its relevance to our everyday lives.